Imagine unlocking a set of iron gates that once guarded a corrupt judge's lair, only to discover those same halls are about to become your neighborhood's beating heart. Picture velvet drapes ripped down by volunteers, cigar-stained bars smashed into scrap, and secret fiber optic lines, once used for blackmail, rewired to beam free Wi-Fi to kids doing homework on the lawn. Envision the very woman who tried to auction off her neighbor's house now knee-deep in compost, building wheelchair-height garden beds beside the man she once called the cops on. Add a rogue flood, hidden blacklist servers, and a midnight roof leak that nearly derailed the whole dream, and you've got a redemption saga more twisting than any courtroom thriller. Tonight we'll walk through marble corridors that echo with scandal, watch them transform, brick by stubborn brick, into classrooms, tech labs, and a copperleaf wish tree that pulses every time a lantern launches into the sky. Ready to see how a neighborhood turns a scandal mansion into a lighthouse of second chances? Backhand index pointing down, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from, smash that like button, share this wild ride with your crew, and subscribe, then ring the bell so you never miss the next jaw-dropping chapter. A warm Pacific breeze still clung to Elliot Rivers' Hawaiian shirt as his rideshare rolled to a stop in front of his neat, single-story home on Alderwood Court. 14 days of surf, poke bowls, and blissful disconnection had melted every knot in his patent lawyer shoulders, until the door clicked open and he stepped into what looked like a suburban carnival. Cars jammed both curbs, lawn chairs dotted his zoysia, a lemonade stand materialized where his mailbox should have been. Most alarming, 24 strangers held numbered paddles like bargain hunters at an estate sale. Front and center on the porch stood Karen, the neighborhood's loudest voice at every HOA meeting, wearing a navy blazer that could direct air traffic. Clipboard in hand, she pointed at Elliot's cedar shutters with the flair of a game show hostess. "Do I hear 45,000? Granite counters. Open concept living," she bellowed, rolling her R's like an amateur auctioneer. Elliot paused at the edge of the driveway, suitcase wheels rattling over loose gravel. For a heartbeat he wondered whether the jet lag was staging a hallucination. Then Karen's eyes locked onto him, sunglasses flashing, yet she kept right on chanting bids. A teenaged volunteer waved red flags to stop inbound traffic, as if the cul-de-sac were a makeshift Sotheby's. A paddle shot skyward from Mr. Delaney, the produce store owner. Mrs. Ortiz, 2 lawns down, followed with a hopeful 47. A ripple of excitement rolled through the crowd, while Elliot's pulse backflipped. Not only was this his property, complete with 8 years of paid mortgage and a security system humming behind the door, but all his furniture, diplomas, and Cat's automatic feeder still sat inside. He advanced, flip-flops slapping concrete. "Excuse me," he called above the din. For the first time, Karen hesitated, clutching her clipboard like a riot shield. "This is a private auction," she declared, chin high. "Interested buyers must register and show proof of funds." "The proof is in my wallet," Elliot replied, voice calm in that slow, surgical way lawyers deploy before evisceration. "I'm the owner." Gasps fluttered. Paddles dipped. Someone whispered, "Is that really him?" Karen's smile thinned to a straight razor. "Impossible. The previous owner abandoned this house. Per HOA standards, I'm safeguarding neighborhood value." "Interesting definition of safeguard," Elliot muttered, unlocking his phone. He began filming, a silent promise that every audacious syllable would live forever in cloud storage. "Folks," he announced, pivoting selfie-style so house, crowd, and Karen filled the frame, "welcome to the moment an attempted property heist goes viral." Faces shifted from thrill to unease, paddles inched downward. Yet Karen squared her blazer, as if authority could be tailored. "He's bluffing," she shouted. "Adverse possession is my right." Elliot's smile was pure lava flow cool. "Adverse possession takes 7 years, not 7 sunsets on Waikiki." He pocketed the phone, lifted his suitcase, and mounted the porch, each step a beat in the prelude to a legal storm about to drench every onlooker who had mistaken holiday silence for surrender. Elliot didn't waste breath arguing from the bottom of his own porch. Instead, he stepped through the open front door, cool as an escrow check, and pivoted to face the gathering. From inside he could see every familiar shape of his life: grandfather's oak hall tree, the ceramic hula girl he'd bought that very week in Lahaina, now serving as silent witnesses. His security system gave a friendly chime, "Welcome home, Elliot." "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, projecting through the doorframe, "this open house is over." A collective groan rose. "Mr. Delaney lowered his paddle. Mrs. Ortiz muttered something about wasted gas. But Karen held her ground, clipboard hugging her chest like a life vest. "HOA authority," she barked, tapping its cover, the rulebook she loved to quote yet rarely understood. Section 14B empowers a designated resident to manage derelict property in defense of neighborhood standards. Elliot leaned against the jamb. Section 14B empowers you to mow a neglected lawn, not liquidate a $400,000 asset that never belonged to you. Karen strode closer, heels clacking. "You disappeared, Elliot. 2 weeks, no lights, newspapers piling up, abandonment criteria, plain as day." "As plain as Maui sunshine," he countered. He fished a postcard from his pocket, the one he'd mailed her, the shoreline of Kaanapali on the front, "Thanks for watching my houseplants." Scrawled on the back. Her lipstick-red signature jumped off the card, "Received, Karen." He held it high. "Looks like a timestamp to me. Care to explain why your memory's on vacation too?" A ripple of laughter spread through the crowd. Brenda Millstone, notorious for live-blogging HOA drama, whispered into her phone's mic, "He's got receipts, literally." Karen's face flushed. "Forgery. Anyone could write my name." "That's fine," Elliot said, sliding the card into an evidence sleeve he'd pulled from a briefcase by the hall tree. Handwriting experts love paid work. The spreadsheet bomb inside, Elliot set his suitcase aside and unlocked a slim laptop. The screen filled with a spreadsheet, rows of check numbers, names, amounts marked registration fee. He turned the display toward the crowd. "Square servers time-stamped every swipe you processed this morning, Karen. Total haul so far, $350. Not exactly Sotheby's, but enough for misdemeanor fraud in this state." Gasps again, a few attendees edged toward their cars. Mr. Delaney actually slipped his paddle into his jacket as though returning stolen silverware. Karen's veneer finally cracked. She reached into her blazer pocket, produced a walkie-talkie, and barked, "Code pink, porch immediately." 2 teen volunteers, Karen's twin nephews, trotted up, eyes wide. "Escort Mr. Rivers off premises," she ordered. The boys hesitated. One glanced at Elliot's Harvard diploma visible through the doorway, the other at the camera in Elliot's hand. "Auntie, maybe we should do it now." Elliot closed his laptop, unperturbed. "Touch me and you escalate from fraud to assault." He typed 3 digits on his phone but didn't hit call yet. "You sure you want that?" When Karen dialed first, "I'm not the criminal here," Karen shrieked, yanking out her own phone. "Dispatch, I need officers at 22 Alderwood Court, burglar in progress." The twins backed off at the word burglar. Brenda Millstone, narrating for her vlog, added, "Plot twist. She's calling the cops on the homeowner." Elliot finally tapped his screen. "Yes, operator, this is Elliot Rivers, owner of 22 Alderwood. My neighbor is attempting to sell my home without consent. I'm secure indoors and have identification." He paused, then purposely added, "Oh, her name is Karen." "Yes, like the meme." That earned a laugh from half the street. Except Karen, who clutched her phone with a death grip, eyes darting. Realizing the dispatcher wanted proof, she blurted, "He's not from here, probably one of those investors taking over nice suburbs. Elliot, still on his call, murmured, "Please note she's making discriminatory statements." Waiting under a shaky tent, sirens wailed in the distance. The crowd split, a few slipped away, embarrassed, others stayed for the encore. Mrs. Chen dragged her folding chair closer, fanning herself like the matinee had just begun. Inside, Elliot printed 2 copies of his deed from the wireless printer, legal-size pages stamped, notarized. Meanwhile Karen paced the porch, whipping up her nephews. "Remember, he threatened us, said he'd destroy the neighborhood." One nephew swallowed. "Auntie, he only said he'd record everything and let the law handle it." "Same difference," she snapped. Elliot stepped back out, holding the deed and a thick binder titled, "Adverse Possession, Myths vs. Statutes." He set them on a patio table for anyone curious. "Free legal education," he quipped. "You'll thank me when Zillow tries to gaslight you." Flashing lights and body cams, 2 patrol cars eased up. Officer Riley, a stocky veteran Elliot knew from an HOA block party detail, exited first. His rookie partner, Sanchez, followed, body cam blinking. Riley took in the paddles, the clipboard, the nervous bidders clutching refund receipts, then turned to Elliot. "You the complainant or the suspect, Mr. Rivers?" "Complainant and property owner," Elliot replied, handing over ID and deed. He pointed at Karen. "She's been conducting an unauthorized auction." Karen jumped in. "He abandoned the house. I activated HOA emergency protocol." "Which section?" Riley asked. 14B, she blurted. Sanchez flipped Elliot's binder open to the highlighted line. "In cases of clear vacancy exceeding 90 days, lawn care may be assigned." He raised an eyebrow. 90 days, ma'am." He was gone 14. Karen's mouth opened, no words came. Riley surveyed the crowd. "Anyone pay a registration fee?" Hands rose timidly. Mrs. Ortiz waved a cancelled check receipt. Riley whistled low. "We'll need statements." He radioed for a fraud unit detective. The "people like him" slip cornered. Karen's voice climbed an octave. "This is what happens when certain types move in and think they can leave property to rot." Riley cut her off. "Ma'am, I advise you remain silent unless you'd like to add a hate crime enhancement to your charges." Gasoline met spark, Karen exploded. "Hate crime? I have black friends. I just care about property values." Phones rose like periscopes, neighbors filmed in stereo. Even her nephews looked mortified. Elliot's offer with the situation spiraling, Elliot addressed Riley loud enough for cameras. "Officer, provided all fees are refunded today and an immediate cease and desist is signed, I'm willing to postpone civil action until I consult counsel." Karen wheeled on him, mascara smearing. "You can't threaten me with lawsuits." "Threat?" Elliot echoed. "Consider it a courtesy notice." Detective Marta Duong arrived, reviewed Square transactions, and read Karen her Miranda rights for attempted grand larceny and fraudulent conveyance. When cuffs clicked, the street fell silent except for the sprinklers kicking on next door. As Karen sat in the cruiser, she hissed through the window, "The HOA will side with me." Elliot smiled. "Maybe. But the State Bar Association already sided with me the day I passed the ethics exam." Aftermath on Alderwood court. Officers took statements, bids were voided, Brenda live-streamed the refund line. Mr. Delaney apologized to Elliot, promising lifetime produce discounts. Mrs. Ortiz gave him a Tupperware of empanadas. Welcome home, for real. Inside, Elliot finally placed his Maui souvenirs on a reclaimed wood shelf, thinking how fast tranquility can turn to trial prep. He wasn't eager for litigation, but he'd defend his castle. Even one-story ranches have moats when the owner knows the statutes. Out front the HOA newsletter box burst open with neighbors stuffing anonymous tip letters. some supporting Karen, more condemning her. Elliot closed the door, set the alarm, and opened his travel-sized bottle of Kahlua rum. Tomorrow he'd sift through footage with a litigator's eye, tonight he'd toast to the simple victory of sleeping in his own, unsold bed. If paradise could be interrupted in a single afternoon, it could also be reclaimed before midnight, provided the rightful owner knew when to press record, when to show the deed, and when to let justice clock in for overtime. The morning after Karen's arrest broke with a foreboding hush. Alderwood Court, normally alive with sprinklers and joggers, felt like a museum at sunrise, neighbors peeking through drapes, uneasy about the social earthquake none could unsee. Elliot Rivers brewed Kona coffee in a kitchen still scented by the lays he'd tossed on the counter. Every sip tasted of unanswered questions. Would Karen post bail? Would the HOA circle wagons or finally enforce rules against its loudest enforcer? And how soon would Elliot himself be summoned beyond witness duties, into a civil litigation vortex he hadn't asked for? Before the mug was half empty, his phone pinged, HOA emergency session, noon today, Clubhouse. He exhaled. Paradise, Phase 2. Politics. Noon found Elliot entering the cedar-paneled clubhouse where HOA board members sat at folding tables like earnest debutantes awaiting judgment. At center, Harold Bryce, board president and retired actuary, rapped a wooden spoon for order. The room smelled of drip coffee and tension, pastry boxes lay untouched. Thank you for coming on short notice, Harold began, perspiring behind bifocals. As you're aware, yesterday's incident places the HOA in a precarious position. Murmurs. Mrs. Ortiz crossed herself, Mr. Delaney focused on his phone as if produce prices needed urgent consultation. Harold cleared his throat. Firstly, we extend apologies to Mr. Rivers for the distress caused by a board officer acting outside any sanctioned authority. Heads nodded. Brenda Millstone, still streaming for her vlog, zoomed in on Elliot's face. With a heavy heart, Harold continued, we hereby suspend Karen from all HOA duties pending legal resolution. Motion? Seconded, Brenda chirped, camera still rolling. Gavel tapped against styrofoam plate, unanimous. Elliot didn't gloat. He simply asked, will the board cooperate with police and refund all registrants? Harold promised yes. Brenda whispered to her stream, accountability finally trending. As dusk painted the street blush orange, an Uber rolled up to Karen's bungalow 2 doors down. Out stepped the former auctioneer, now wearing jeans instead of a blazer and sunglasses bigger than remorse. Bail had cost her $20,000, Elliot later learned, posted by an aunt with deep retirement funds. She ignored paparazzi neighbors, ducking into her home, but not before Elliot noticed a bruise of embarrassment coloring her cheeks. A single sheet of paper, sheriff's bail conditions, fluttered in her hand, listing a no-contact order that mirrored the police recommendation. Stay 200 feet from 22 Alderwood. That night the neighborhood Facebook group lit up, screenshots from Brenda's footage, speculation on Karen's sentence, even memes of paddles labeled fraud and fail. Elliot scrolled but never commented. Litigation, like chess, favored the silent until checkmate. Monday, 9 a.m., Elliot's calendar pinged ADA Renee Lawson. He entered City Hall's second-floor office, rows of case files like barricades. Renee, mid-30s, radiated prosecutorial zeal. Mr. Rivers, she said, gesturing to a chair, thank you for the crash course video. Open and shut fraud cases rarely come gift-wrapped. Elliot nodded. Happy, well, able, to help. Renee outlined charges, attempted grand larceny, Class C felony, fraud in the 4th degree, trespass. Her attorney's angling for a plea, she added. How many months? Probation, restitution, community service. But given the racial slur we captured, we're considering a hate crime enhancer. Elliot remembered Karen's ugly, people like him, sneer. Apply it, he said. Not vengeance, principle. That afternoon, Elliot's own counsel, Clark Nahas, maritime cargo lawyer turned friend, phoned, civil damages, my man. Emotional distress, defamation, property invasion. How hard do we hammer? Elliot stared out his office window at budding magnolias. As hard as ensures she never targets another neighbor. Nothing more, nothing less. Clark whistled. Purpose over profit. Gotta love Harvard guys. 2 weeks later, court docket, State v. Karen Westcott, her surname finally trending. Elliot arrived early, hair trimmed, suit charcoal not showy. Clark flanked him, a manila folder stuffed with settlement math. Across the aisle Karen sat beside defense attorney Russell Dade, murmuring like mother and scolded child. She avoided Elliot's gaze, thumb tracing cuticle moons. Before the judge took the bench, Dade approached Clark with a yellow legal pad, offer. Guilty plea to fraud misdemeanor, 300 hours of community service, full restitution, $350 plus fines, public apology, anger management and cultural sensitivity courses, civil settlement $15,000 and non-disparagement clause. Clark slid the pad to Elliot. He inhaled. $15,000 wouldn't dent his bank account, or his dignity. But apology requirements mattered, so did mandatory education. He scribbled an adjustment, plus hate crime acknowledgement, plus permanent HOA ineligibility. Plus she funds HOA legal literacy seminar. Clark passed it back. Dade returned minutes later, thumbs up. At 9:58 the plea was inked. At 10:10 Judge LaVon Peters formalized it, adding her own flair. Ms. Westcott, you'll also author an article for the State Bar's community newsletter on the pitfalls of self-styled legal adventures. Gasps, then stifled giggles. Gavel. Saturday morning, Alderwood's Pocket Park hosted Karen's mandated apology. A lectern borrowed from the high school stood beneath blooming dogwoods, HOA chairs lined the lawn. Local news vans idled, Brenda live-streamed again. Elliot perched on a bench, arms folded. Karen stepped up, eyes hidden behind thin spectacles instead of glam shades. She read from a sheet, voice shaky but clear. I, Karen Westcott, sincerely apologize to Elliot Rivers and the community for my irresponsible and unlawful attempt to auction his home. My action stemmed from personal bias and ignorance of property law. I acknowledge the harm and pledge to repair it through service, education, and by funding legal literacy workshops. I accept the hate crime enhancement recognizing the racial prejudice in my words. I hope to regain your trust. Silence followed, then tentative applause, begun by Mrs. Chen, ironically. Elliot did not clap, he simply nodded once, the lawyer's equivalent of so noted. Karen's 300 service hours started Monday at Hope Haven Outreach Kitchen downtown. Brenda's vlog documented the first shift, Karen hairnetted, ladling soup beside former shelter resident Big Nate. In that video Karen confided, I never talk to people outside our block. Maybe that's how fear grows. Social media pivoted, comment threads debated redemption versus punishment. Elliot focused on HOA stipulations. Using Karen's settlement funds, he and Clark prepared a workshop. Homeowner rights and responsibilities, adverse possession myth-busting. Brenda volunteered marketing, Mr. Delaney donated produce smoothies, Officer Riley, now community liaison, agreed to present. The first session filled the clubhouse, neighbors from all backgrounds, plus visitors from adjacent subdivisions spooked by Karen's saga. Elliot opened with humor, Lesson 1, Vacations do not transfer title. Laughter broke ice. Harold Bryce remarked after that HOA attendance had never been so diverse, or respectful. As spring matured, the neighborhood's vibe shifted. Karen's nephews joined Elliot's weekend chess club, once wary, now eager for tutoring. Mrs. Ortiz, formerly timid, ran for HOA vice president unopposed, promising transparency. 6 months passed, Karen logged every hour of service, wrote her bar newsletter essay, From Clipboard to Courtroom, How Ignorance Became a Crime, and planted pollinator gardens as contrition, irony, given the petunias she once fretted over. One humid July evening, Elliot found a handwritten note at his door. "Elliot, you owed me nothing yet," offered Grace. "I'm still earning it, one bowl of soup or bag of mulch at a time. Thank you, for the lesson and the boundary." Karen. He tucked the note inside his binder. Proof change sometimes begins with a lawsuit but continues with a ladle. By fall, with legal dust settled and HOA calmer than a Zen garden, Elliot revisited his paused bucket list. Scotland's Highlands beckoned. He updated security, gave Mrs. Chen keyholder duties, and, this time, circulated departure dates in a group email cheekily titled, "This is not abandonment." Replies featured winking emojis and offers to mow the lawn gratis. At sunrise the day he left, Karen's refurbished garden caught his eye. No sign of the once omnipresent clipboard, just monarch butterflies hovering above echinacea. She emerged, waved a tentative good morning. He waved back. The neighborhood might never forget the auction fiasco of 23, but it had chosen to learn from it, not calcify around it. Elliot touched down in Inverness 2 days later, renting a cottage overlooking Loch Ness. He packed no legal briefs, only a notebook labeled Story Seeds. Nightly, beside peat-smoke fireplaces, he jotted lessons, that law without empathy becomes bureaucracy, that boundaries protect, but dialogue repairs, that Karen, once meme shorthand for entitlement, can, under sustained pressure and reflection, transform into a cautionary tale of change. Back home, the HOA newsletter headlined his workshop recap, "Knowledge Beats Clipboard, Alderwood's Legal Triumph." Brenda's vlog shifted focus to garden hacks and restorative justice interviews. Officer Riley reported a 40% drop in petty neighbor complaints, less yelling about trash cans, more sharing of extension ladders. Upon Elliot's return, Alderwood Court welcomed him with a chalk sign drawn by Karen's nephews, "Welcome home, we saved you a paddle for souvenirs." A playful nod. Elliot laughed, tapped the sign with his suitcase, and felt the heft of closure settle like dew. At sunset, community members gathered in the park for a potluck. Karen, hair tied back, served empanadas beside Mrs. Ortiz. Elliot raised a toast of sparkling cider, to lessons learned without lives lost, to neighbors who choose better after seeing worse, and to the law, our moat and our bridge. Cups clinked. Even Karen's smile reached her eyes this time. Elliot's final reflection, scribbled later on his porch under string lights, captured the arc. When a neighborhood confronts its own reflection, it may find cracks, but that's where the sunlight enters. He set down his pen, breathed in honeysuckle, and, secure in house, community, and conscience, finally exhaled the last trace of Maui's interrupted paradise, knowing the next journey would begin from firmer ground. Autumn swept across Alderwood Court on a hush of gold leaves and cooler evenings, yet the air still crackled from the summer's courtroom drama. Elliot Rivers returned from Scotland rested but mindful that healing a neighborhood requires more than a court order and a check from a chastened defendant. Though Karen Westcott's public apology and community service sentence had quelled immediate tensions, conversations felt brittle, the way porcelain teacups still tremble long after the clink. During HOA meeting number 1 after Elliot's trip, Board President Harold Bryce announced an idea inspired by the Legal Literacy Workshop, a full-day, lantern night of service and solidarity. The plan: neighbors would volunteer in 4 lantern teams, each tackling a project in the wider city, then cap the day with a twilight gathering under copperan paper lanterns strung along Alderwood's oaks. "Light spreads farther than gossip," Harold quipped, tapping his gavel. Even Brenda Millstone's vlog chat erupted with heart emojis. Elliot agreed to co-chair. Karen, still under probation but eager to rebuild trust, volunteered for logistics, her nieces and nephews at the ready. Over the next week, sign-up sheets filled fast. Elliot split the community into 4 themes, each matching a color lantern: green team, riverbank restoration; lead, Elliot; blue team, Homeless Outreach, lead, Karen's nephew, 19-year-old Carter. Amber Team, Senior Tech Tutoring, lead, Mrs. Ortiz. Rose Team, Community Garden Expansion, lead, Mr. Delaney. Karen, still barred from official HOA titles, served as roving quartermaster, arranging supplies, insurance waivers, snacks, and, importantly, lanterns, handmade from translucent vellum layered with copper leaf, echoing the infamous Copper Tree LED art piece she'd helped fund in restitution. Elliot kept a watchful but fair distance. Part of him worried she might overcompensate, but her focus seemed genuine. He often saw her late at night triple-checking volunteer rosters beneath porch light, clipboard gone, replaced by a humble spiral notebook. Saturday dawned brisk and bright. Elliot's green team loaded shovels and biodegradable erosion netting into pickup trucks bound for the river's elbow, a bend where spring floods tore away banks each year. City engineers had donated rock baskets. Elliot's role was to orchestrate volunteers, including Karen's two nephews and Mrs. Chen's teenage granddaughter May, who live-streamed the event for her environmental science class. With waders strapped and gloves on, they unrolled netting, drove stakes, and planted willow cuttings. Elliot demonstrated correct shovel angles while explaining riparian law. Remember, water property lines fluctuate, but stewardship is constant, like citizenship. Near noon, as clouds gathered and a brisk wind riffled the water, Karen arrived bearing thermoses of cocoa for the muddy crew. Elliot thanked her. She blushed but stayed silent, setting cups beside every volunteer. Only when she finished distribution did she whisper, "I googled effective riparian planting. Coffee grounds help root growth, brought a bucket." Elliot chuckled. From attempted auctioneer to riparian barista, versatility suits you. Simultaneously, Carter's blue team set up folding tables under I-38's overpass, distributing hygiene kits and hot chili. Carter, socially awkward but good-hearted, had programmed an app to track needs, inspired by Elliot's earlier workshop. Karen stopped by to check supplies and witnessed Carter gently teaching a veteran named Reggie how to use a donated phone. Yet tension surfaced when a man in a ragged coat, Flash, known to police, recognized Karen from news coverage. "Hey, it's the lady tried to sell her neighbor's crib," he hollered, half teasing. A few others laughed. Carter flushed crimson, Karen's hands shook but she met Flash's eyes. "You're right. I messed up," she said. "Trying to fix what broke, starting with lunch." She served him a bowl, adding cornbread. Flash accepted, nodding. Later, Carter told Elliot via text that the moment had diffused distrust. Several attendees joined the meal rather than mocking. Elliot typed back, "Service reputation. Proud of you both." Across town at Crestwood Senior Center, Mrs. Ortiz's Amber team taught elders how to video call grandkids. Brenda filmed for her channel, less scandal, more smiles. Karen's niece Lucy helped a 92-year-old former maths teacher use a tablet. Mid-lesson the fire alarm malfunctioned, squealing. Seniors panicked, staff fumbled. Elliot's phone buzzed, Amber team distress. He forwarded the call to Officer Riley, now community liaison, who arrived within minutes, calming folks. Lucy kept seniors seated, narrating instructions over the din until technicians silenced the alarm. Brenda's vlog later framed it, "Kids overcame chaos, proof that empathy codes better than any app." Meanwhile, Mr. Delaney's Rose team expanded the public garden behind the library, installing accessible raised beds. They discovered vandalism, several tomato cages bent, soil littered with beer cans. Volunteers frowned. Mr. Delaney, once quick-tempered, recalled Elliot's lecture on restorative practice. Instead of calling police, he left a whiteboard with markers, "If this garden affects you, tell us why." By afternoon, scrawled comments appeared, some contrite, "We were bored." "Sorry." Others needy, hungry, "Wish we could eat from here." Rose team added a sign, "Free produce on harvest days." Conflict turned collaboration, new volunteers from the skate park joined to repair cages. Karen arrived with mulch and water jugs, wordlessly building new friendships. Evening settled, teams converged on Alderwood's Pocket Park. Tables overflowed with potluck dishes flavored by global heritage, Ortiz enchiladas, Chin dumplings, Delaney's caprese skewers. A stage of hay bales held the copper tree light sculpture, programmed by May to pulse each time a lantern pairing left the ground. Karen handed Elliot a spool of fishing line. "You tie strong knots," she said softly. He noticed her thrift store sweater dusted with soil, hair tied back. Lantern ceremony began with Harold reading the HOA's newly amended charter clause, drafted by Elliot, restricting any future, emergency property intervention, to board-approved measures and 30-day notice to the owner. Applause rang, Karen clapped highest. For youth volunteers lit the first lantern, green for restoration, its glow reflecting on river mud stains still on Elliot's boots. He and May launched it. The copper tree pulsed emerald. Blue followed, symbolizing dignity outreach, amber for intergenerational skill sharing, rose for nourishment and forgiveness. As each lantern rose, May's algorithm traced arcs onto a projector screen, lines connecting into a constellation shaped vaguely like a house. At launch 10, Karen approached Elliot with one last lantern, copper-leafed and etched by her nieces, equality under every roof. They lit it together. As it floated upward, the copper tree flickered a gradient of all 4 team colors. Gasps, then a hush more profound than any courtroom silence. Harold nudged Elliot to address the crowd. Elliot hadn't composed remarks, but the moment required sincerity. "Neighbors," he began, voice a little rough from riverbank dust, "law can punish wrongdoing, but it can't draft a thriving neighborhood. We, all of us, write that charter daily with our choices." Today those choices looked like shovels, soup ladles, tablets, and tomato cages. And yes, he added, glancing at Karen, sometimes the authors are the same folks who once scribbled footnotes in the wrong margins. Light laughter rippled. Karen's eyes shimmered but she stood tall. "I went to court to keep a roof," Elliot continued, "but I came back from Scotland believing we can raise entire skylines, lantern by lantern, if we choose service over suspicion." He lifted his coffee thermos in a toast. "To roofs, roots, and the raw courage to rewrite ourselves." Days later, local news ran a segment on Lantern Night. Positive headlines flowed, until a regional talk radio host lambasted the HOA, "Suburban shame fest, criminal became hero." Social media trolls accused the board of virtue signaling. Then City Hall sent Elliot a letter, River's Elbow project lacked final permits. Bureaucratic whiplash threatened fines. Elliot drove straight to the Public Works office, binder in hand. There he met Director Sophia Gold, who admitted confusion, "Your volunteer forms crossed wires. We can't condone unsupervised riprap." Elliot proposed a remedy, "We'll host a joint site review, supply post-planting data from our sensors. If specs fail, we'll adjust." Sophia, impressed by the proactive stance, agreed. Still, stress mounted. Could an HOA recover from both internal scandal and now potential code penalties? Karen learned of the snag via HOA email, offered to join Elliot at the review. He hesitated. Official partnership with the person partly responsible for the fiasco risked optics, but fairness won. On a drizzly Thursday, Elliot, Karen, and Sophia's engineers inspected River's Elbow. To Sophia's surprise, willows thrived, netting held, and May's sensors showed reduced bank erosion by 14%. One engineer asked how volunteers aligned installation angles so precisely. Elliot deferred. Credit Karen, she researched anchor geometries. The engineer jotted notes, Karen's cheeks reddened but she smiled. Sophia announced the city would adopt their low-budget method in 2 other trouble spots. Fines evaporated, City Hall promised a commendation plaque instead. Later, Elliot offered Karen a handshake by the truck. She shook, then said, "I still replay that day I tried to auction your house. Nightmares, actually." "Nightmares fade," Elliot replied, "if daylight work keeps following." Weeks passed, seasons tipped toward winter. HOA tasks quieted. Karen completed her 300th service hour at Hope Haven, but kept volunteering beyond. She invited Elliot to speak at a job skills class for clients transitioning out of homelessness. During Q&A, someone asked him, "How do you stay calm when falsely accused?" Elliot glanced at Karen before answering, "Facts anchor you, empathy sails you forward." Afterward, Karen admitted she'd enrolled in paralegal night classes. "Understanding the laws I once misunderstood feels like atonement." Elliot became her informal tutor. Tuesday evenings on his porch they pored over tort chapters, neighbors waving as they walked dogs. December HOA audit showed a 70% drop in petty disputes, a 40% increase in volunteer hours. The board voted to retire the infamous 14B clause entirely, replacing it with * Community Support Protocol. * requiring 2/3 board approval and legal consultation before any property intervention. At the year-end holiday party, Harold unveiled a portrait series, neighbors captured during lantern night, lantern glow tinting faces Hope Rose. The last frame depicted Elliot and Karen launching their copper leaf lantern, smiles tentative yet genuine. Harold announced, "City Hall recognized Alderwood for civic excellence. We get a grant to expand our garden and river project. And Elliot, they want you on the advisory committee." Applause. Elliot raised his cider. Karen approached shyly with a wrapped gift. Inside, a miniature paddle carved from copper, engraved, "Justice Auction." He laughed. "Too soon?" she asked. "Perfect timing," he said, placing it on the mantel next to a Maui seashell and a Highland pebble, souvenirs, each marking a chapter of interrupted paradise and reclaimed peace. New Year's Eve, Alderwood strung lanterns again. This time embedded with battery tea lights against the frosty sky. Snowflakes flickered through their glow. Elliot stood beside Karen by the copper tree. "Do you still think about Scotland?" she asked. "Only when I want to remember why distance can clarify purpose," he replied. He eyed her paralegal textbook tucked under her arm. "You'll be a good advocate, Karen." "I hope to be a bridge," she said. Clipboard days are over. Midnight bells chimed from downtown. Lanterns. Lightweight with ice crystals, lifted slower than in July, but lifted nonetheless. As they drifted beyond housetops, Elliot murmured his porch oath, amended once more, "Guard the driveway, welcome the stranger, mend the riverbank, and light the night so even our former shadows can find their way home." Karen heard, nodded. Together they watched the miniature suns float, each glow echoing the copper tree's steady pulse, each pulse a reminder that redemption, even for an HOA, and hope. Even for a once wayward neighbor, are renewable resources, bright enough to guide any community willing to reach up, hand in hand, and keep releasing lanterns into the darkest sky. 12 months had slid by since the copper lantern ceremony, and Alderwood Court's most notorious address, Judge Caldwell's confiscated limestone estate, stood empty, ivy reclaiming its columns. One damp April morning Commissioner Elliot Rivers stepped from his sedan, fresh deed in hand, flanked by a modest welcoming party, HOA President Harold Bryce, vlogger-turned-publicist Brenda Millstone, retired deputy-turned-volunteer Mark Tolbert, and, at a careful distance, Karen Westcott, the clipboard-wielding neighbor whose ill-fated auction had launched every transformation now underway. City Council had voted the previous night, unanimous. Donate the mansion to Alderwood's residents for a civic arts and service hub. The burden of unlocking, and repurposing, its checkered history fell to Elliot. He slid the brass key home. The gate groaned open, and sunlight struck a brass plaque still bearing Caldwell's initials. Elliot unscrewed it, handed it to Karen without comment. She cradled the relic, face somewhere between grief and resolve. Same rule as the copper tree, Elliot said. We keep the metal but change the meaning. Inside, dust motes whirled through stained glass light. The grand foyer's Persian runner muffled their footfalls as Brenda unrolled architectural sketches across it, inked by Karen's teenage nephews who traded Xbox time for drafting tutorials. East Wing, Brenda recited, becomes literacy classrooms. Ballroom splits into gym and daycare. The conservatory goes greenhouse therapy for vets. Tolbert hoisted a crate of Chromebooks. Tech lab goes in Caldwell's study. Elliot paced the ballroom's parquet floor, imagining bleachers where cucumber sandwich banquets once reigned. First fundraising gala by autumn, he murmured. Karen said nothing, jotting supply lists in a spiral notebook. Her court-ordered community service had ended weeks earlier, she stayed anyway. The community's first Saturday swarm descended with pry bars and painter's tape. Mrs. Ortiz directed a drape-pulling line, Mr. Delaney commandeered sledgehammers for removing a cigar-stained bar. Carter and Lucy balanced on ladders, labeling antique fixtures for auction, to bankroll the future. Elliot wrestled Caldwell's marble mantel crest into a padded crate. He'd donate it to the county museum, where misused power could gather dust instead of influence. When the crest thunked shut, Karen exhaled like she'd set down a backpack of bricks. Do we ever outrun our mistakes? She asked quietly. Only by building something larger than them, Elliot answered, handing her a box of respirators. She donned one and returned to work, ripping velvet drapes free until daylight blazed through unshuttered windows. Week 3, electricians found hidden fiber lines snaking behind vintage wainscoting, Caldwell's covert data splice. The network still pinged an offshore server. Elliot called Agent Eileen Song, now regional cyber chief. By dawn, Song traced the line to a storage locker stuffed with hard drives, blackmail dossiers Caldwell kept, just in case. She loaded them into evidence bins. Elliot watched officers padlock the van. The house is finally offline, Song said. Now you can put it back online for the right reasons. Karen overheard. Let's repurpose the conduit for community Wi-Fi, she offered. Song raised an impressed brow. Permission granted. Summer's first heatwave struck as volunteers tilled the mansion's back lawn for a public garden. Tolbert laid drip line, Elliot shoveled compost with Carter and Lucy. Karen, knees muddy, fitted cedar planks for accessible beds. Mid-afternoon a city truck delivered river willow saplings, offspring of the cuttings Elliot's green team had planted after the flood. The symbolism hit him hard. Roots anchoring new banks, just as the mansion's troubled foundation would soon support classrooms and seed trays. They planted in silence until Carter spoke. My aunt says every shovel she lifts buries a bit more of her shame. Tell her it's growing soil, not burial, Elliot said, wiping sweat. Everything green needs decayed things beneath. Carter nodded, jotting the quote into his phone's journal app. By July, drywall dust had settled and alder trees cast shade over fresh sidewalks. Alderwood held a copper parade to escort finishing touches inside. Brenda live-streamed as Karen idled the copper-painted Lamborghini, now more civic mascot than ego trip, at a crawl. Children sat in the hatch waving seed packets like confetti. Elliot marched up front with rookie officers from Brookview's most diverse academy class, their new badges shaped like intertwined oaks. Inside the mansion, guests wrote pledges on copper foil leaves and clipped them to a welded tree. Branches forged from Caldwell's old iron fence. One promise read, guard the driveway, open the gate, mend the river, feed the soul. Elliot recognized his own handwriting. FEMA Deputy Dr. Jocelyn Ward toured the site, reviewed flood sensor dashboards, and whispered to Elliot, this belongs on our National Resilience Network. Alderwood's model would soon seed elsewhere. 2 days before grand opening, disaster flirted again. Overnight rain pooled on the ballroom's new maple floor. Roof flashing left unsealed. Warped boards threatened the schedule. Harold panicked, Brenda lamented vlog optics. Karen grabbed a clipboard, her first in a year, but Elliot laid a hand gently over it. Figure we use chalk lines and science, not decrees, he said. They mapped the leak, patched in rubber membrane by flashlight. Carter's sensor app calculated humidity drop, Lucy's crew rigged box fans in crossdraft. By dawn the warping reduced. Insurance adjusters waived delay penalties, impressed by data-driven triage. Karen slid the clipboard back into storage, a smile creeping beneath exhaustion. The mansion opened on a clear September evening. String lights draped from balconies, the copper tree pulsed as every visitor clipped new leaves. Mrs. Chen's youth orchestra played under the now fully greenhouse skylight. City officials presented Elliot and Karen with certificates of merit. Hers inscribed, at Elliot's suggestion, for turning consequence into contribution. When the speeches ended, Harold invited guests to wander. Elliot stayed behind with Karen in the foyer. The Persian runner, now professionally cleaned, hosted shoe prints of hundreds walking over old ghosts. She touched the banister. I used to fear I'd only be remembered for the worst 5 minutes of my life. And now? Elliot asked. There's at least 6 minutes of something better, she teased, then grew serious. Thank you for not throwing me away. Elliot shook his head. I didn't rescue you. You rebuilt yourself. The neighborhood just held the ladder. Late that night, Elliot propped tired feet on his cedar porch rail. The copper tree's distant glow reflected in his Kona-blend coffee. Karen approached, holding 2 lanterns left over from last year. Thought we'd keep the tradition, she said. They lit wicks. Soft light rimmed their faces. What now? She asked. Now, Elliot mused, we guard the driveway, sure. But maybe we start teaching other driveways. He described an idea, a traveling workshop combining his legal literacy with her lived lesson, a tandem presentation for HOAs statewide. Karen hesitated, then nodded. I'll need to keep studying, paralegal classes start Monday. Good. I'll send case briefs. They released the lanterns. Rising, they crossed above the mansion, copper glow joining copper leaves, each a spark from ruins forging community. 12 months post-opening, the mansion, rebadged Elmwood Commons, logged metrics, 3,200 volunteer hours, 500 GED tutoring sessions, flood sensor data informing 2 county projects, garden produce feeding 150 families weekly. Grant money flowed, copperleaf pledges filled 3 trees. Elliot filed a report to the city, signed by him and Karen. The cover read Roots Beneath New Stone. He added an epigraph from a Scots proverb he'd picked up lakeside, from a humble seed the mightiest trunk may rise. As he hit send, rain pattered, gentle this time. He envisioned willows flexing along river's elbow, mansion walls steady, lanterns awaiting next season's lift. Mistakes lay buried, indeed, but not forgotten, fertilizer for authentic growth. On his porch, the miniature copper paddle Karen had gifted him caught porch light, reflecting twin promises, law and neighborliness, both sharp as metal, warm as sunset bronze. Elliot exhaled, certain the community's foundation, legal, literal, and emotional, was finally deeper than any storm could scour. And somewhere inside Elmwood Commons, a former auctioneer filed event receipts, humming softly, clipboardless but equipped. Proof that a misused gavel's echo can eventually harmonize with the steady rhythm of service. True community, the kind that endures storms and scandals alike, is woven from equal parts accountability, forgiveness, and shared labor. We watched a neighborhood confront its darkest corners, an attempted house theft, a corrupt mansion full of hidden surveillance cables, even a flood that threatened to wash every good intention downstream. And instead of splintering apart, the residents chose to roll up sleeves and build something larger than their collective shame. From the patent lawyer who kept documents and composure when confronted by fraud, to the once self-appointed Karen who traded her infamous clipboard for a soup ladle and a paralegal textbook, every character learned that legal justice is only the first step. Moral repair requires repetitive, humble acts of service. The mansion itself became a parable. Stone walls erected for privilege now house GED classes, tech labs, and a copper wish tree that glows each time someone volunteers. The garden beds, filled with composted mistakes, remind us that even what has rotted can feed fresh roots. For adults who wonder whether it's ever too late to redirect a life, and for seniors who worry their best contributions are behind them, the lesson is simple and profound: every day offers a new blueprint. We can harvest wisdom from past errors, convert resentment into reconciliation, and repurpose the sturdiest parts of our histories, whether marble halls or hard-earned skills, into lighthouses for others. When we anchor ourselves to evidence, empathy, and persistent neighborly effort, we discover that second chances are not charitable exceptions but essential building blocks of civil society. So let's carry these insights beyond Alderwood Court. Remain vigilant about facts, courageous in apology, generous in cooperation, and creative in transforming what once represented exclusion into spaces that radiate welcome. If this reflection resonates, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you'll be first in line for the next story of resilience and renewal. Your engagement helps these life lessons reach every porch and every heart.